and all the complicated stuff that many of you guys are working on. And let's talk about the project, the data warehousing or the BI project in general. And that's going to be kind of the point today. And it's more of an overview and consulting and making sure that we've got the right priorities and you could say objectives in mind. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in a little about myself. I've been working in technology for a very long time. I mean, I'm a self-taught, expert in, well, I wouldn't say an expert. I'm a self-taught, individual that knows a lot about many things, but not necessarily an expert in all those things. So I started off kind of, tinkering with computers. That led me into basically education, where I worked within business and IT and built up a lot of IT skills. And I've been working in the industry now for about 12 or more years, working as a technology specialist on various projects and various departments and initiatives. And then in the last about 6 years, I really got focused into data warehousing and starting those initial conversations of, hey, I've got a lot of data. I need to do more with it. I don't know what I need to do, but I know I need to do more with it. And so I've been working with organizations to basically refine that question and that challenge that many companies are starting to encounter now. They've already encountered, many of them have already encountered it. I would say now some companies are trying to catch up or just maybe renovate their old processes and add some new technology to it. So I've got some experience in Azure, in data warehousing, in ERP, Power Platform, SQL, SSIS, and SharePoint. And of course, Power BI is within the Power Platform. So my company, DCG, Dynamic Consultants Group, is giving away some Surface earbuds. So feel free to put in that promo code and you guys can basically get, potentially a chance to win. And here's my contact info. Feel free to look me up, Adam Jones from Kansas City, and then also my email address. So that's a little about me. And I like to run something like this is I love how you guys have been asking questions, and I think of it more like a Twitch stream or one of those online video streams where the guy's talking and people are asking questions and he's addressing those questions if they're relevant during the conversation. So please feel free to bring up those questions, and if it's not dragging me down, I'll try to respond to it and make it so you guys can relate to the content. A little about my company. I work for Dynamic Consultants Group, or DCG. We're a gold partner. We basically have been focused on partner consulting, but lately we've actually been building up a client-facing business. So we're now starting to work directly with end users in businesses to make their needs or to find solutions for their business process needs. We've done a lot of CRM and ERP implementations. Business intelligence and SharePoint is something that I've really focused on building up and making sure that we've got a practice that can support those needs. And we've got a lot of, like I said, partner generated stuff that we work in. So our strength, DCG strength, is working with different partners. We've got a huge network. And if we don't know how to do it, we have someone within our network that knows how to do it. So that's kind of a little bit about us. And then another thing, the final thing, we've introduced something called Powerlearn Academy. So for anyone out there that's like just trying to figure out what to do in BI and what to do in maybe Dynamics Consulting or in Microsoft 365, we've got a new training program where we're basically saying, hey, if you want to go and challenge yourself in consulting, this is an avenue to do that. So if you have any interest, feel free to go to our powerlearn.academy and check that out. Now, without further ado, so here's why we came today. So at the end of the day, you want to deliver basically a solution that people are going to use, right? BI and data warehousing projects, they can get very large. They can become, the scope can creep, data can get collected because it sounded great at some time, but there was no actual plan to use the data, right? And then at the end of the day, you've built a lot of ETL processes to move data from places. You built a lot of reports, you built a lot of calculations, but at the end of the day, no one really plans to use that and make that part of their business process. So we really need to focus, I think, with these business intelligence projects is the business part of the organization needs to focus on what they need, right? What exactly do they need? And these are some steps that you can basically go over to kind of narrow down on those. The Powerlearn Academy, Powerlearn.academy. That's the link right here. So, but basically, these are the steps that you can go through, right? Where this will help you wrap your brain around the priorities and the key topic areas that will help you drive effective conversations around what the organization wants and what's going to be accepted by that culture within the organization, right? That's the most important thing. So, key steps. Number one, consider your culture, right? We need to understand, well, what is the company used to doing? How is reporting generally flowing throughout the organization, right? Now we need to and then after that, we need to set the priorities. So what are the priority topic areas, right? What are the priority dimensions? What are the priority measures? And then we need to start to go and set goals against those measures, right? Because if we're not setting a goal, we're really not going to be able to measure it effectively, right? And we're generally, if we're not setting a goal, we don't have a real good use case for that metric, right? It's just information, right? We need to have goals so that we drive performance and improve performance. Number four, we have the data model. So now that you've set these priorities, now that you have basically your goals established, now we need to start modeling it out, right? We need to go and create kind of you could say you could do it in Excel, you can do it in many ways, but basically we need to create kind of an example or a mock-up that we can talk about and really wrap our brains around the data we're collecting and how everything needs to relate, right? And then after that is reporting. So generally, you need to have an idea of what the end vision is going to be, right? What kinds of reports do they need? Do they need tables? Do they need graphs? Do they need charts? What filters are available? Can they filter on customer? Those are the things that you need to start kind of putting together, like even at a minimum, a bulleted list of these are the features that we need to have, right? And then security, of course, every data project, there's always a security element to it. Who should access what? What information needs to be locked down? How can you group those users that need to access that information, right? And basically, if you follow all these steps and you have a nice set of documentation with these steps documented, you're going to be able to productively drive conversations in developing your BI platform and program. So, number one, consider culture. This is honestly the most important section. If you don't address the existing culture and really analyze and understand how the reporting is flowing through the company, the manner in which that reporting is done, aka is it Excel data tables, and we've been doing that for 100 years. So if you go and you change that Excel data table to a new line chart, is that acceptable? I mean, are people going to still need the Excel data table? Ideally, I'm sure they will, right? So you need to really consider the culture and how the organization reports things. Performance management is something that I mean, every business does it, right? Some do it poorly, some do it extremely well, and have various methods to managing and analyzing this performance. You need to really understand how this is done today so that when you go and you introduce changes, the more mature that existing performance management process is, I'd say the more sensitive you need to be to the change that you introduce, right? You can't just go and drastically change someone's process who's been doing that for 25 years without making some compromises there, right? You have to kind of slow them into that change if you really want someone to adopt what you're doing. Your initiative, it may struggle if you go into things thinking, I'm just going to roll out a new tool and people are going to love it. It's way better than the one before, and there's just no way you can disagree. Unfortunately, people are just going to be so used to the way things have been done, depending on the maturity of the organization, that you are really going to have to find a way to get the old reporting almost in the new system. Hopefully that makes sense. But you must be cognizant of how business is done and sensitive to changing those processes too drastically all at once, right? Change has to happen. It's just the art of consulting is managing that change and kind of slowly delivering it so that you're adding value and you're upgrading the processes, but at the same time you still give people that ability to sort of do what they used to do, right? So slowly manage and introduce the change according to the maturity of your organization, right? So, and also if your processes are extremely mature, like they've been developed for a long time, it's an old company, you will need to work with the owners of these processes and to make sure that you're not just creating a system and saying, hey, what do you think? You work with them on designing and developing that system, because at the end of the day, and this is where it's going to lead into, um, they need to be a sponsor for you, right? They need to be a champion for you. And so kind of falls into this slide here. You need to appeal to that existing culture, right? If they have a lot of Excel tabular data, make sure your new reporting, it has Excel tabular data, right? You need to still have that stuff that those guys can relate to, right? Or else the change is it's going to become a bad word. You need to kind of satisfy both worlds. Now, part of that, right, the existing culture is identifying those project sponsors. Who in the organization is going to help you sell this project, right? And to the business, right, to operations, to sales, to accounting and finance, not necessarily to the IT team, the IT department, but who's going to help you sell these processes. And at the same time, sometimes these are the same person, right? The champion and the sponsor. They, in a smaller organization, they can be the same person. But I cannot undervalue the champion. The champion is someone who's from your line of business, right? And this person, every single day or every single year or whatever, he's been reporting performance the way things have been done for however long. He knows that process. Every time he needs to communicate to the company how performance is going, he uses that same process that he is either developed or he's been a part of for a long time. You need that individual to buy into your process, right? So you need to find those individuals, and generally they're senior type individuals, right? Where he's the vice president of engineering, and he's the one who manages whether or not the industrial operations are performing correctly. That person, when the new tool comes out, he needs to be saying, "Hey, this is how we used to report this. We've got this new report. This is how we should now be communicating this performance information." And he's bought in to what you're doing. And if you have an issue where you have champions out there and you're developing solutions and they aren't fully bought in, that's a conflict that you're going to have to address, or you may just struggle with your BI implementation because they're not fully bought in and they don't like your system. So I hope that makes sense. I think this section could almost be, I mean, its own hour course on how to define project sponsors and some of the issues that come with not having these people identified. But this is very, very important, and I think you can't implement BI solutions and tools without having this soft stuff, the soft skills here, or you could say the non-technical pieces fully mapped out and engaged. So after you've worked with the culture, right? And now you start to you have an idea of what people want, right? Or you have an idea of how the organization currently communicates. And within that, you've identified those sponsors and those champions. Now you need to work with those sponsors and champions to understand, well, what are the priorities, right? What data exactly, or what topic areas do we need? What particular dimensions do we need? Customer, client, business unit, department. Well, what kind of measures do we need, right? Sales revenue, inventory values, and so forth. You need to start identifying those priority, basically those priorities within the different topic areas, so that you can start creating a data model, which is going to come later. It can be everything that you collect, and you cannot, I can't stress this enough. You should not, and this was brought up in a question in the previous session. You cannot collect data just to collect data. That's going to cost a lot of money. The ETL processes where you're moving data from one source into your data warehouse or into your model, that is going to cost a lot of money. Storing all the data that doesn't necessarily have an intent or purpose is going to cost money. You need to really set priorities on what exact data that you want for your processes, right? And that way you're not overcomplicating your process, building out KPIs that no one really plans to use, or yeah, exactly. Basically just making sure that you only go after data that has a very specific purpose and intention. So first off, you need to set priority topic areas and data sources. This is the general stuff, right? So I want my sales data and I want margin analysis, or I want my industrial data and I want inventory management, right? And I want my sales data and I want the revenue is the topic area. You start to basically build a little Excel file here, right? Where you send this to your champions, you send this to your sponsors, and you say, hey guys, through our analysis of culture and discussions with various departments, these are the general business areas and topic areas and so forth that we think exist within the company, right? Now you send this to your key champions and sponsors and you say, hey, I want you to rank these topic areas, right, and these data sources for me. And that way they go and they rank. And then what you could do is you could just do a very simple little average, right? Where now I get all of my individuals to rank those priorities. And then now I can create a company average. Company average. And this can help me drive kind of maybe what I start on first, right? Because as you understand, I mean, going after Dynamics 365 CRM versus going on after an MS SQL on-prem data source, those are two different data sources, right? And there's some effort in there to basically merge them into a common data warehouse. So maybe your priority is let's just start with the D365 CRM data source, and that's what the people want to do. But basically, this can help you drive kind of where you start your efforts. But at the same time, it helps you identify all the different areas that you eventually need to bring in. So so basically the questions here, what are the priority topic areas, right? And then what are the priority data sources? And again, there are so many more questions and so many more topics to go into. But the point of this course is say, hey, what kind of information can I put together and gather that will help me effectively and efficiently drive this conversation, right? So at some point when maybe you present this to a consulting partner, they'll have a lot of questions about the D365 CRM. They'll have questions about the SQL on premise, but basically this will help you drive that conversation as opposed to starting from scratch where I just know I need to do more with data, which is a common challenge in business terms that people are having these days with all the different systems that we're now we're generating data in. So I think this is very important. This kind of helps you set the tone and direction, I think, that you're going. Okay, so after that, now you want to create priority measures. So now I have the topic areas. Now within each topic area, so AKA sales and margins, I need to start understanding, well, what measures are a part of that, right? That way I can narrow down on exactly the raw data that I'm going to need to compute these measures, right? We're trying to go after only what we need. We're not trying to capture everything because that can overcomplicate things. So now what we need to do is we start to analyze those priority measures, right? So you can do something like this Excel file here, right? Where you have a number of the KPI, a simple description, maybe a product line, something like that. Category, and you start to kind of, you could say, categorize and create attributes for your KPI, for your measures, right? Exactly, DAX measures. And then, of course, the nice thing here, or what's important, I think, is having the report field on there as well. So now what we can do is we can start to map the measures that we need for our data warehouse and our BI initiative, right? And maybe the existing reports in which they're found, maybe in Excel or some other reporting system. That way we can map the new system to, you could say, the old reporting process, right? So now, once we've done that, once we've prioritized our measures, right? Now we need to prioritize the dimensions. So now that we know we want to look at revenue, right, or receipts or ending inventory, well, well, what kind of dimensions, how do we need to categorize those receipts? How do we need to categorize that ending inventory, right? So you need to come up with your list of dimensions. And that's going to be, site, your products. So raw materials is a dimension, finished goods is a dimension, your customers is a dimension, salesperson is a dimension. All the information in which you assign more or less an attribute to a transaction, that's a dimension. So in a database, in a SQL database, you will, in these operational systems, you have hundreds of columns sometimes. I mean, you have many, many columns. You really don't want to pull every single column. You only want the columns that you need, right? And that's where this is going to help us kind of prioritize the exact dimensions that we need. And this is a business activity. This really shouldn't be just IT people kind of thinking with outside of the business. This needs to be an activity that is done with business users to understand exactly what they need to manage that business effectively. So now we have the priority topic areas, the priority data sources, the priority measures, and the priority dimensions. Now that we have that created, now we say, okay, to create those measures and to properly report all those dimensions, what transactional data do I need from those source systems, from Dynamics 365 CRM, from SQL on-premise? What fields do I need from those source systems in order to compute my measures or to present my dimensions, right? So that's where this is very important. We want to work backwards. This is so we're not going and collecting every single bit of transactional data. We're only getting the data that we need. So this is why I say work backwards, map all that out, and then say this is the raw data I need for my source systems, instead of just going back and blanketly grabbing every single bit of data, right? So the idea here is minimum data necessary. Nowadays, everyone is I would say a lot of people are what's the word for it? They're deactivating. I cannot think of the word for it. I'm sorry, but they're deactivating their on-premise systems and they're moving to the cloud. And as everyone knows, there's a cost into every bit of data that you store in the cloud. And so you really want to try to make sure that you're not bringing over any unnecessary data into the cloud that you don't need. So do not load every, no, no, don't load every data point from every source. Have a clear intention for the data you are aggregating, right? Don't just um, collect data to collect data, is what I've heard people say. And there's a lot of there's a lot of reluctance into BI projects because leaders feel that they're just collecting data to collect data and there is an intention. And that's where this process here, I hope, is going to help you you understand some of that process and maybe some of those subject areas that can kind of help narrow down exactly what you want and where you want to go. So here's a rough example of kind of that source transactional data file, what it could look like, and maybe some of the information that you would want to track about each source transactional each source transactional topic area. So for number one, we have raw material receipts. In this case, our data warehouse requires that has moisture, that has a moisture assigned to it, right? And then here we also have the stage database that we're going to put that data into, right? And this is, in some cases, you may want to put this into one table, but in other cases, you may want to separate this because they're different business activities. You may want to separate them into separate tables. And so that's where here you can basically start to say, okay, this source data is going to go into this source staging table, or I'm sorry, this staging table basically, right? And you can start to categorize maybe the BI process area, right? Any of the relevant devices, right? Like there's a scale, sensor, and this can basically just be very important for if you need to go back and maybe you want to automate this process and connect directly to the scale instead of a manual entry form that is done in the ERP system. this is kind of helps you build that. Um, it helps you build the documentation on whether or not that's even possible. And then, of course, here what I have is this is the source system form. I think this is really important because when you have this on your list of source data, you then know exactly where that data is coming from, right? So I know this raw material receipts is coming from the person who is entering the purchase order, right? So if I run into issues later, I know exactly what form that I need to go and look at to see, well, did they enter the data wrong or what happened, right? So this is a very important, I would say, reconciliation or association that you make here, is what form is on each, or what data point is generated on each source form, right? Number three, goal setting. So now we've identified our culture, we've set our priorities. Now we need to set goals, because if we don't have any goals, then the information is really just information, and it may not be useful to actually making sure we're doing better, or we're doing it may not be useful in identifying if we're doing better or worse at something, right? The goal setting is the barometer for us. It's the reference point. Um, and that, I think that is very important. And this is actually, I think you get the most usage, and this is where you get your intent out of BI, is when you set goals, right? If you have a goal for something, you know that basically it will be used, right? Um, Assuming you have a goal setting process where you're regularly reviewing those goals and how you performed against them. So managing performance. If you don't know where you're going, you will probably end up somewhere else. I thought that was a great quote. I think when it comes to goal setting, quotes are very applicable. But basically, you need to set an objective or a goal in order to, over time, manage how you are doing against that. Otherwise, it's just a data point that you may or may not be using, right? So set these goals to help you manage performance, and make that data useful, right? Like I said, data is less useful unless there is a reference point. So you need to make sure you have a reference point. So any questions? I'm guessing there's no questions, but if you have any questions, please. I see a question. This is a very structured approach. Reminds me of the old BW approach where we structured and contemplated everything beforehand. Well, yeah, I mean, and again, I think that it is important. I mean, otherwise you'll spend a lot of time just working with consultants or working with developers trying to figure these things out in maybe a less formal fashion. Um, this is just like a way to kind of, formalize that process and maybe give you some steps that you can do before you even talk to a consultant. Um, I think that's the idea. Or if you are a consultant, I think you can use these steps here, and then you can go and you can drive conversations with your partners, your clients, and be very productive and go through, you could say, a linear path, as opposed to maybe just kind of throwing things spaghetti at the wall. This is a very linear path to follow. So anyway, data is less useful unless there's a reference point, right? Implement SMART goals. So make sure and make sure your goals are specific, right? They're simple and they're sensible. Don't have a project to wow. I think everyone understands what SMART goals are, but basically you need to make sure that the goals are relatively simple and sensible. They make sense. You need to work with your end users to make sure that they believe in them and they understand them. And there's a process in which they can refine those goals, right? And they have a voice for those goals. They need to be measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. That's just the standard goal setting process. So nothing really, nothing really to do with BI, but in general, this is a big focus when setting goals. So data model. So now we've got all of our raw dimensions or raw data. We've got our dimensions, we've got our measures, and we've got our topic areas identified, right? Now we need to start kind of modeling it out. I like to do this in Excel because it's old school and it's easy. I think everyone can understand it. So if you work on a data model, you can pass that to a business person, and generally they can kind of understand what you're doing. because the formulas are more or less clear. So I think a data model is next. This is more or less your mock-up, right? This is showing the users how you're bringing everything together, the raw data elements, the dimensions, the measures. This is how the sales data and the finance data relate to each other, right? This is a very important model, and this basically is what your consultants or your developers, they're going to recreate this in the data warehouse in Power BI, right? So you're more or less doing a mock-up for them. But I think it's really important that users within the business do this type of mock-up. That way they fully wrap their brain around what they want, and how those metrics need to compute. Um, and that's, I think, because there are multiple ways you can structure the data to achieve certain results on the calculations. So this is a way for them to model that out using Excel or any other tool, but Excel is just, everyone knows it. So I tend to do Excel. But again, you're mocking up your future data structure, right? What columns do you have? What measures do you have? Um, are there different data sources, right? So now we have fields in the data model that relate, that allow them to relate. So maybe you have a GUID field, right? That is in one table, and then maybe that same GUID field is a foreign key in another table, and that's how those two tables relate. So you can join the operations data with the finance data or the sales data, right? And then, of course, you also demonstrate how the measures need to calculate. I think oftentimes there are complicated formulas with some of these data warehousing projects. And I think you really need to have the business users sit down and explain those formulas and really document those formulas, and if possible, demonstrate how those formulas work using Excel formulas and measures if possible. And then, of course, you have the data model will demonstrate how the dimensions should look, right? What fields can you slice and dice and categorize on within a particular table? Okay, so reporting. The last step here, or not number last step. Number 5 is basically reporting. So, you know, generally the culture has a way of doing the reporting. So in many cases, you can go back and you can look at, okay, well, the old reports, and you can see what they've done. And I think it's really important, as I said earlier, you need to sit down with your team, and you need to really understand how things have been done. What's the culture of reporting at the organization, right? That way, when you go and you develop these mock-ups or these requirements for your new reports, you have that in mind. You have the old way of doing things in mind. And in some ways, depending on the maturity of the organization, your new reports need to have a lot of old features that your old reports had, right? And I usually say, just like Excel data tables. A lot of companies, they're used to reporting in Excel, right? So if in Excel is it's just data tables generally. I mean, unless they're using Power Pivot or something. So you need to incorporate in your reporting a similar process so that people can still get the data that they're used to getting, but then maybe you've got some new tabs, new additional features, that is the new stuff that you're really trying to push them to. And then hopefully over time, they find that, oh, I can get my trends, and I can spot outliers a lot easier if I go to these new tabs. And then they sort of slowly transition from the old tabular stuff that they're used to. But reporting, I think if it's in a mature and it's a well-established organization, you really want to spend some time and make sure that um, you know your future reporting is very similar to the old reporting. Or if you're making big changes, then you need to make sure that your business leaders, your sponsors, and your champions, they're all bought in, and they love the fact that we're getting rid of the old style and replacing with the new style, and the old style is going to be gone. Um, so I have just come from a background where I was at a relatively mature organization, and some of these changes that we introduced were very drastic and different from the way things were done before. And so we spent a lot of time in trying to get users to adopt and to adjust to the new process. And I think at some point you need to give them what they're used to having before, and then you need to give them a little bit of the new stuff as well. And if you need those champions that are using this reporting, right? They're believing and they're not just preaching the stuff, they're using the stuff. I think that is so important, and that's why champions are so critical to the support or to the success of your reporting. But if you can, create a mock-up. So have your business user, if possible, create, maybe a PowerPoint mock-up or an Excel mock-up, a Word mock-up of basically of what you want the future reports to look like. What sections need to be there. Maybe at the top you have your filter menus, what the tab names need to be. Basically just a list of features and requirements for your reports. I think that will really help you understand exactly what the business in general, needs to see in the visuals, right? They don't know what they don't know, so they probably won't be able to draw too much up for you, but maybe you can just give them a list of, hey, this is the topic, this is the content, right? Now maybe you can tell me if this content needs a line chart, a data table, filter button, and so forth, right? So security, this can be a whole can of worms. There's a lot of stuff to consider when it comes to security. And again, I'm keeping this from more of a business consulting perspective as opposed to a highly technical perspective. But basically, you need to have some sort of discussion with your users on security, right? What major requirements do you have? Who should access what content, right? Um, Sometimes you'll have within the data warehouse, I have 100,000 records in the data warehouse, but maybe one of my columns is company, and a user should only see the data within their company. So you can add things like row level security, and that will further secure content within your data warehouse. But these are all conversations that need to take place, and you need to basically have at least some bullet points or some documentation around what kind of security needs to be in place, right? What kind of data at rest security, encryption, all that stuff ideally needs to be covered. It doesn't necessarily have to be covered all up front in this particular setting, but it will get covered at some point. And the more details you can add up front will really help your consultants scope out the proper solution. All right, so I'm speeding through this. So basically, the conclusion: we need to consider the culture. The culture cannot be underestimated. You really need to work within your users to understand what's being done today. You can't just drastically change what they've been doing for 100 years, 50 years, 20 years without getting some serious pushback, right? So you need to understand what is acceptable for changes and for a new process within your culture. And then you need to kind of slowly, I would say, introduce changes according to that culture and the maturity of that culture and what your sponsors and champions are willing to approve or willing to endure within their department or their business area, right? So this is a conversation. I'd say that it's a negotiation between your project sponsors and your champions and the IT team or the management that wants to implement these new solutions and new technologies. So then we've got to set BI priorities, right? So after we've identified the culture, then we set the BI priorities and we make sure that we have documentation that can show consultants or our own internal developers the topic areas and the content that we need to start modeling out, right? And then after that, we set up our goals, right? We establish goals. We make sure that every piece of data that we're collecting has a purpose and has an intent. And we have some way to reference whether that value that's been computed is a good value or it's a bad value, right? Did we exceed expectations or did we not meet them? And we need to understand where our business process is having issues. So once you've set the goals, now we can do the data modeling, right? Now we can start to bring everything together, and we can create manual calculations in Excel. We can create all kinds of different basically, you know, ways in which the data relates. We can create columns, and we can now show and we can better explain to developers or consultants what we are trying to do and how this data relates, and most importantly, the formulas that need to be in place within Power BI and the technology. And then further, we've got reporting. So once we have the data model identified and just general, you could say data tables, now we need to understand, well, how does that data in the new system, how does it need to be visualized, right? Is it just a data table? Is it just a line chart, pie chart? What filter options are available, and all that good stuff. Um, and for security. So final thing is security. This could be a big conversation, of course, but basically you need to understand some basic features or basic requirements for security. Role base, what roles do you need to have? What maybe departments do you need to have? What kind of row level security do you need to have within the data? Um, and I'd say that's pretty much it. Bring these details to any prospective consulting partner, or a developer within your internal team, and this will help you effectively start these conversations and drive them forward, right? This isn't the end all be all, but this will help you further understand your plan, and then I'd say make action to accomplishing and providing a solution.
Thank you, Adam.
So that's pretty much it. Any questions? I don't really see much come up.
There's one question in relation to which Matthias asks, which is, would you favor a center of excellence team, cross-functional for the BI implementation, or should be in hand of IT?
That is a wonderful question. So one of the things that back here, things that I did in a previous company, this wasn't just so this right here, this list was actually reviewed by a steering committee. So I believe firmly that if you're working within a larger organization, right, and you've got multiple departments and maybe people that are competing for priorities, you could say, I think it's very, very important to create a steering committee, right? That's maybe your CEO of the company, maybe the head of finance, the head of HR, the head of IT, right? And you bring these users together. And once you've created these content areas, such as this one right here, I think is very important. This particular one, what I did at a previous company is we did the rankings. We sent these rankings and we got notes from all the users in the organization. And then what we did is we had the steering committee review these rankings. And in some cases, the steering committee said, no, I want to rank this one higher than this one. But they still saw what the users within the organization, how they ranked them, right? So the steering committee made the final decision, which I think is important. But they did it based on feedback they had received from within other users in the organization. So does that make sense? So I think more of a steering committee. I don't know if we're using those words interchangeably. Um,
So Matthias follows on by saying steering is one part. What about the doing? Cross-functional BI power users.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I find with Power BI, I think if you really want to do it effectively, you need to get kind of users within the departments as power users. So maybe it is like a center of excellence where you've you've brought users, the doers, together through some sort of some sort of group, right? A team. But I think a lot of the power users within Power BI are going to live within a department. So within operations, you need to have a power user that knows Power BI very well, and basically they're doing their best to make it useful within their department and answering any of the executives of the department's questions and challenges. And if they have a challenge that is too complicated, they would report that to the BI project team, you could say, and that's maybe part of that center of excellence team. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. So that's the final question from Matthias and from everyone. So thank you once again for that, Adam.
Yes, sir. And I will follow up just finally. If you want BI and a tool like Power BI to be useful, you need to get it into the hands of the people. So I think you find the most benefit out of a tool like this when you're not rigidly holding it up in IT. And I think personally that's why Microsoft has been gaining a lot of ground on some of our competitors because this tool is very ad hoc, and it's very much a tool for end users to get in there without a whole lot of IT experience and just play around and build reports. So you want to encourage your department users to maybe be a part of a team, but then to own it within their department. So I hope that makes sense.
Definitely. So Adam, did you have a special prize you wanted to announce?
Well, we do have this. We do have our Surface earbuds. So if you scan this, you'll be able to enter to win the Surface earbuds. So go ahead, pull your cameras out, scan this, and then you have to enter the code DCG Rocks 2021. DCG Rocks 2021. What do you mean all in the world? Oh yeah, yes. We will send it to you, assuming the mail comes to you.
Okay, great. And whilst we wait for people to scan that to complete for a chance to win those prizes, there is one more question asking, is there any good book you can suggest on this topic? And I think the topic that they were referring to was the topic on actual adoption and on transformation. Maybe not specific to data, but generally on that topic, I believe.
Let me think about that. Not off the top of my head, but I have a little list of. I have a little OneNote basically with a bunch of notes for this. So let me see if I can send something.
So the final question by John. Oh, so we have a few more questions coming through here, actually. Jan Raw is asking, to what extent do you think that governance is needed?
Well, and I think it's going to depend on the maturity of the organization and the type of, you could say, ad hoc that you want the type of ad hoc activities you want your users to be doing. Some companies, they want to create the report and they don't want the users to even touch it and be able to change it. Personally, I like the ad hoc method where I create the report, and if you're and I'm an IT, and if you're a business user and you want to make some tweaks, I give you access and you make those changes, and it's kind of a tool where you make it your own. So I think it depends on the organization and in the content, right? In some cases, it's a report like maybe a regulatory report or it's a financial report, and that structure should never change. And anytime someone comes to look at it, it should always be the same. So I think it depends on the content, right?
And Sarah is asking, can you please share your presentation link? I believe if anyone scans your barcode, they will also receive the link. Is that correct?
I'll need to confirm.
Okay, I think that's what was mentioned last time. Anyone who completes the form, they will automatically get your contact details, or you will get their contact details to share the information, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be an automated process, but I can absolutely reach out to anyone that wants the contact or the presentation.
Great stuff. Right, okay. So we do have only a few minutes left till the next session. So Adam, do you have any more words of wisdom or announcements to make?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think you could spend a lot of time and years can go by before you have anything valuable from a BI project. And I think it's really important that you sit with your business users, and you really address those champions and those sponsors and say, hey, what do I need to do to make your job easier, right? Like, we have to work together to come up with a process that you will buy into. You have to get their buy-in. You can't just be working in parallel trying to create a solution that you think they'll like. You must know they will like it. Otherwise you'll struggle with adoption. I think adoption is the biggest challenge when it comes to these BI projects. So do as much research and do as much upfront work as you can to make sure that people are ready to adopt what you have. So
great point. And Adam, I actually have a question myself, really. To what extent would you look to implement some kind of unified data dictionary to facilitate these kind of transformation projects? For example, for Dynamics projects, for Power Platform projects, is something I tend to do quite a lot, so that everyone's got or singing from the same hymn sheet, basically, when it comes to the data and the data definitions. From a general kind of BI perspective, I've not really seen that implemented much. People obviously given reins to kind of go in and do the data, but often they're looking at different kind of data sets and figure things out themselves. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So what I find is in general, people will do this in Excel. Now, what I've seen another company do is they actually took all this logic. So this right here is one tab in the data definition file, right? I called it a data definition file. This was the raw data, right? And then this right here was the KPI tab, right? And then this would be one of the master data tabs for site, right? And you basically have an Excel file that has all the metrics and formulas. In my previous job, I could not have done my job very well without that Excel file, because I would get many questions on how is this calculated? How is this calculated? And I would be able to literally just send a screenshot from our data definition file with a quick little circle basically on the formula that they were asking about. So I find that once you create this content, you'll keep it maintained in an Excel file, and you'll call that the data definition file. And then anytime someone needs a quick understanding of what something means, you can go to that file and basically you have the definition. And I've seen other companies that actually they take it out of Excel, and I think this is the future, right? Like, putting in Excel is not a great long-term way to distribute that information to users. What you want to do is put that on some sort of intranet or wiki site where they can just go, and then they can filter on all the different topic areas, right? And they can see the formula as a part of that, and they can go get that information themselves, and they're not going through my Excel file, or they're not just going through an archaic Excel file I've stored on SharePoint or something. I've seen it done in a wiki, and I thought it was awesome.
Fantastic. Well, what a great way to add the cherry on the cake. Yeah, there you go. So I think Jack just mentioned put a PBI report on top of it. How about that? Yeah.
There we
Excellent. So once again, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam, for sharing wisdom today, and also sharing some insight into how you approach data projects. Very insightful. So I want to thank you. So there you have the website link. Feel free, Adam, if you want to share any links in the chat for the community, if they need to follow up or connect with you, feel free to share those links in the chat.
Awesome. I will do that.
Thank you once again, Adam.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity. And please, if you have any questions, reach out.
Excellent. And on a final note, Rishi just mentioned that there is a new scanner API, and to check out the Power BI adoption roadmap as well to complement all of this knowledge. Fantastic. Excellent, Rishi. Okay, fantastic. We are now on to the final session of the day. Final session of the day begins the next few minutes, and it's none other than Deepak Shrivastava. Okay.